So that's one problem. Here's problem two that we want to address. We have so many tools to use in the ministry, it can be overwhelming and confusing, even to the best minds. So your older ones don't feel, I'm slipping here, I'm confused. No. The young ones are trying to, often overwhelmed and confused. So our teaching toolbox that we emphasized in recent years, what happened is it became a huge tool shed. Now we appreciate the sample presentations at the midweek meeting, but frankly many of us are so busy, we can't keep up with all the latest presentations, no matter how good they are. Well, that was good. And then Saturday morning or Sunday, okay, what am I doing today? We had 3 of them in our midweek meeting. I don't know, what am I supposed to do here? And then if you got a critic nearby, oh Lord, And plus, many struggle to keep up with reading all the magazines. You're not a bad person. Jehovah loves you. We understand. So, in view of this, the governing body is adjusting the focus of our ministry to getting the message, addressing these 2 problems, and we are 100% with this, unanimous. Everybody in the departments connected are with it. They can sense Jehovah's Spirit moving it. This is what Jehovah's doing. It's his chariot. He's the driver. So here's the adjustments. Starting January 2018, there will only be 3 public editions of the Watchtower. For those that are tied in, I heard some expressions down front here. Only 3 public editions of the Watchtower and 3 of the Awake magazines the whole year. Yeah, I'm excited too. I really am. Now, and what's beautiful about this, they're going to cover one subject in the whole magazine, start to finish. Say, one subject. And what's nice, when it's in that permanent teaching toolbox there, you're not changing all the time. And was all that sincere? Yes. But I could tell you stories, but time's running out of some of the things I've heard out in the ministry. I could tell they never read that. But they're out there. God love them. They were knocking on doors with me. You get familiar with the tool. Now what we'll do, we'll evaluate after 2 years, and it might be, we'll see what the governing body decides, that we think we've got sufficient subjects in the magazines for the tool. And then we'll just reprint. It's already been written.
As we just heard in these audio clips from the 2017 annual meeting of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, held recently on October 7th, Anthony Morris announced in the final talk of this event entitled Making Our Blows Count, a 50% cutback in the number of public edition Watchtower magazines that will be produced. Beginning with January 2018, this magazine will only be published 3 times per year. Each of these issues will cover only one topic, and after 2 years of this arrangement, the governing body will evaluate whether the 6 new issues that have been thus far produced cover a sufficient variety of topics such that no future issues will be necessary, and the previously published material will then be recycled. This, of course, would mean the complete suspension of publication of new public editions of the Watchtower magazine by the year 2020. Also, he states that the amount of literature printed has been simply overwhelming and confusing, and that witnesses have not been able to keep up with reading it all. He also says that witnesses have not been familiarizing themselves properly with the contents of each new issue of the magazines, or preparing and memorizing the presentations that are provided for them at the midweek meetings. Anthony Morris's subdued and almost somber tone and his rather unenthusiastic delivery of this message led me to believe that even he himself doesn't believe that these were the main and most important reasons for these changes. Might the real reason behind this latest 50% cutback be that producing printed magazines is no longer a profitable activity for the corporation? All this made me remember a statement by Charles Taze Russell in a very early edition of the Watchtower. I couldn't recall his exact words or in which issue he had said it. I knew that Russell had begun publishing Zion's Watchtower in July 1879, and I found this statement in the second issue he published, the August 1879 issue. Here, under the heading, "Do You Want Zion's Watchtower?" in the third paragraph, Russell wrote, "Do not suppose these remarks to be an appeal for money. No, Zion's Watchtower has, we believe, Jehovah for its backer, and while this is the case, it will never beg nor petition men for support. When he who says, 'All the gold and silver of the mountains are mine,' fails to provide necessary funds, we will understand it to be time to suspend the publication." Does the fact that the publication of the Watchtower magazine may be completely suspended in the near future, most likely due to insufficient funds to print it, mean that the Watchtower no longer has Jehovah as its backer? As Russell had stated that this would mean 138 years ago? All this made me recall the great fanfare that surrounded the 100th anniversary edition of the Watchtower magazine back in 1979. I'm old enough to remember the 100th anniversary edition of July 1st, 1879, and I remember studying it in the Watchtower studies. The entire magazine was dedicated to recounting the history of the magazine, its growth from a monthly journal of about 12 pages into a semi-monthly publication of 32 pages, and also the growth in the number of copies printed and in the expansion into numerous languages. And I remember how all this growth was said to be evidence of God's blessing and support. We can see this attribution here in the first article of that anniversary edition, entitled "Keeping Watch for 100 Years." Here we read, "This reliance on Jehovah God has proved to be a blessing, and there has been evidence of divine support. For the first issue of the Watchtower, there were only 6,000 copies in one language, and the journal was published only once a month. This growth we attribute to God." These statements make us wonder whether the rapid decrease in the publication of the Watchtower that has occurred in the last 5 years will be interpreted as evidence of the withdrawal of Jehovah's blessings and support. Let's briefly consider a summary of these recent changes. Beginning in 2008, the Watchtower was divided into a public and a study edition, with the public edition published on the first day of the month and the study edition published on the 15th. Each was still 32 pages, the same length that the magazine has been ever since August the 15th, 1950. That's been for the last 62 years. So the same amount of material was still being published. While the study edition continues to the present time to be 32 pages each month, in January of 2013, the public edition was reduced to 16 pages, cut in half. Then, in 2016, the public edition became bi-monthly, or every other month, cut in half again. Now, 2 years later, as of January 1st, 2018, this edition will become triannual, or every 4 months, again cut by 1/2. Friends, if you had told the witnesses that I knew 35 years ago that the Watchtower would become a magazine that was published only 3 times a year and would have only 16 pages, and that's what they would have to use in their field ministry, they simply would not have believed you. But if somehow you could have shown them that indeed in the year 2018 that this would be the case, they would have probably said, you know, it sounds like the society has just given up. It sounds like they've given up on the preaching work. And I think they would have been entirely correct in that assessment. Why has the society seemingly given up on the preaching work, even saying lately that Matthew 24:14 has already been fulfilled? I think it's because they know that the days of gaining converts in the English-speaking countries of the United States, Canada, the UK, and even in most of Europe are over. And also, the publishing of printed material of any kind is an unprofitable part of any business operation. When the Watchtower Society introduced the new arrangement of charging each congregation a monthly donation, assessment, whatever you want to call it, it's actually rent. Even when the Kingdom Hall was already paid off, this marked the formal beginning of the implementation of their new business model. Just imagine how much money the mortgage companies could make if, after people had paid on their mortgages for 20, 30 years and had their homes paid off, that if they still had to send in their monthly mortgage payment as long as they lived in that home. Well, that's exactly what the Watchtower Society is doing right now. The preaching work has been fulfilled because they no longer need converts to make money. If the congregation can continue to pay their monthly donation, which is really rent, that's pure profit to the Watchtower Society. If not, they simply dissolve that congregation, shift the ones that remain to a nearby congregation, and sell off that Kingdom Hall property and reap the profit from the sale. They profit either way. They profit if the congregation continues to be able to pay their monthly rent, or they profit from selling off the real estate. It's really not that difficult to understand what the new business model of the Watchtower Corporation has become. They are no longer a printing and publishing company, but instead a real estate holding corporation. Thanks for listening.